The blizzard didn't just howl, it shrieked with a fury that felt alive. For Circe, tucked away in her lonely cabin, that scream had been the only companion she'd heard in days. Until something else cut through it. A scratch. Not a single one. Dozens. The night erupted with the violent scrape of claws against wood and the deep primal snarls of a pack that had found exactly what it wanted. A ring of predators. The Frostborn surrounded her tiny home, a storm of black fur and jagged teeth. She had nowhere to run. She had no idea. What Circe didn't know, as she crouched near the fading fire, was that one of those wolves wasn't a mindless creature at all. He was a king, and the only thread of hope she had left. The wind slammed against the cabin like a living battering ram. Each impact made her flinch, pulling her threadbare wool blanket tighter around her shaking shoulders. This was the third night, the third day swallowed by this white-out monster that had twisted the outside world into a spinning void of ice and rage. She lived on the edge of the rocky spine ridge, a stretch of wilderness people avoided. It had always been quiet, always isolated, always safe until now. Circe was 23 and had lived alone for nearly 2 years, ever since her grandmother Eldra passed. Eldra had been the one to bring her here to this 2-room cabin, hidden in a fold of the mountain. "You're different, Circe," Eldra had always told her, those deep violet eyes mirrors of Circe's own glimmering with an old sorrow. "The world is loud, and it will try to use your silence. Stay hidden. Stay safe." Circe had never understood what danger she was meant to avoid. She was just Circe. Quiet. Forgettable. She felt more like a shadow than a threat to anything. In the nearby town of Silver Creek, where she went twice a month for supplies, the locals saw her as the Ridge Girl. Eldra's skittish granddaughter who bought flour and salt before disappearing back into the woods. She was an Omega, though she didn't know the word yet. She didn't realize the dormant power in her blood, a power of calm, of balance, of quiet force. All she knew was that she felt everything too deeply. Emotions from others buzzed in her skull like static, and this whisper of the forest was the only thing that softened it. Up here, the static was gone, but tonight, that whisper had frozen over. The forest wasn't resting. It was holding its breath. Scratch. Circe stiffened her lungs, locking in her chest. The sound was faint, nearly swallowed by the shrieking wind. It came from the front door. Screw-scra! Scratch. A mouse. A branch. Then a low, guttural growl vibrated up through the floorboards. It wasn't one growl. It was a chorus. She crept toward the window, her pulse hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Swiping frost from the glass with her sleeve, she leaned toward the swirling white void outside. At first she saw nothing, just endless suffocating snow. Then a shadow moved. Then another. A pair of amber eyes glowed back at her. A massive wolf, black as midnight, its fur thick with ice. Another shape formed beside it. Then another. They weren't wandering past. They were studying the cabin. Circe stumbled backward, a hand clamping over her mouth to keep from screaming. Wolves. The ridge was known for its dangerous packs, but they never came this close. They never hunted humans. A heavy thud slammed into the door, rattling the frame from top to bottom. This wasn't a mouse. This was an assault. Panic, sharp and freezing, shot through her. She bolted to the door, her socked feet sliding over the cold boards. The iron bar Eldra had insisted on was already locked in place. Circe checked it anyway, fingers trembling. It felt useless. Scratch. 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 The sound was everywhere now. The front door. The side wall. She heard them moving across the porch, a shifting, snarling mass. How many? It sounded like dozens. An entire army of teeth and hunger. She grabbed the fireplace poker, its metal icy and heavy in her shaking hand. It was a laughable weapon. She could hear them breathing hot, greedy breaths, fogging the air near the threshold. They were testing the walls, hunting for a weakness. Another pair of eyes appeared at the window she had just cleared. This one, a gaunt gray wolf with a scar down its muzzle, pressed its nose to the glass. It didn't howl. It simply stared, a low rumble filling its chest like a promise. Sarai slid down the wall until she hit the floor, clutching the poker like it was the only thing keeping her alive. The cabin that once felt like a refuge now felt more like a wooden coffin. Outside, the wind screamed, and the frost-born answered growls and howls, rising in a savage chorus that merged with the storm. She counted the eyes glaring at her through the blizzard. 5, 10, more. They were circling her like sharks. A living tide of nightmares pushing against her door. A headline she once skimmed in an old newspaper shot through her memory. 30 wolves culled. She'd thought it tragic back then. Now it felt like a warning she'd ignored. There had to be 30 wolves out there right now, and every single one wanted inside. Sarai squeezed her eyes shut as Eldra's last words echoed through her mind. When the storm comes, Sarai, don't open that door. For anyone. But the storm wasn't coming. It was already here and tearing its way in. Minutes or maybe hours crawled by. It all blurred into one long, low snarl. They were persistent. They were smart. Sarai stayed pressed to the far wall, every muscle locked with fear. The fire had burned down to dying coals, and the cold crept in, numbing her fingers and chilling her blood. The wolves weren't rushing. They were waiting for her to freeze. Or panic. They slammed the windows, their bodies thudding hard against the reinforced glass. They clawed trenches into the thick oak door. Now they were digging near the foundation like they intended to burrow their way beneath the cabin. Then a sound sliced through the chaos. Something different from the snarling beasts. A human sound. A ragged grunt of pain followed by a heavy, wet thump. It came from the back of the cabin, from the little woodshed attached to it. Sarai's head snapped up. The wolves at the front heard it too. Their scratching stopped, replaced by confused, agitated barks. Silence. Then thud. Again. Someone was in the woodshed. Sarai's thoughts spun. Was it someone from Silver Creek? Someone else caught in the blizzard. But why would anyone be here, and why had the wolves suddenly gotten even more frantic? Don't open to the door. For anyone. Eldra had meant the front door. The shed door only opened from inside. It was her pantry, her firewood storage, her only connection to the outside when the snow piled deep. She heard the sound again, weaker now. A pained groan. Her fear twisted into something sharper, conflicted urgency. If it was a person, they were dying. The cold would kill them. Or the wolves would. The shed wasn't insulated. The outside door flimsy. She stood up, the poker still in her grip. The wolves at the front door hurled themselves against it with renewed frenzy. They knew. They knew someone else was back there. No, she whispered. I can't. Yet her body betrayed her, already moving. She crept into the small kitchen that led to the shed door. A simple plank door. A wooden latch. She pressed her ear to it. On the other side came shallow, tortured breathing and a soft drip. Drip, drip. She needed to see. Her hand shook so badly she could barely lift the latch. She nudged it upward. The door groaned open, revealing a pitch-black, freezing shed. He was slumped against the far wall, a shadow against the stacked firewood. For a heartbeat she thought he was dead. Then he stirred. He lifted his head, and even in the near darkness she caught the glint of his eyes. Not the amber glow of the wolves. These were human, but fierce. Please, the words scraped out of him, broken by a cough. Sarai's resolve shattered. She wasn't going to let someone die. She grabbed her lantern off the counter, lit it with trembling fingers, and stepped inside, raising the light. He was enormous, built like a warrior, carved from stone, broad-shouldered, long-limbed. His clothes' expensive black gear were shredded, frozen, soaked through. His face was sharp-edged, framed by a dark beard. Wild black hair clung to his forehead, with snow and blood. A deep, brutal wound slashed across his left side from ribs to hip. It wasn't a bullet wound. It looked like claw marks, massive ones. And the blood staining the snow wasn't just red, it pooled in thick, black streaks that looked wrong, almost alive. He stared up at her, his face twisted with raw, consuming pain. They're coming. As if his voice summoned them, the flimsy outer shed door bowed inward with a sickening crack, the wood splintering under pressure. A black snout punched through the gap. Sirai screamed. The man didn't. With a roar that held nothing human in it, he snatched a chunk of firewood and launched it with impossible force. It slammed into the wolf's face, sending the beast yelping backward. Bar! The door! He panted, collapsing against the wall. Sirai didn't hesitate. She moved. She shoved the inner shed door shut and dropped the latch just as the wolves corrected their mistake and began clawing furiously at the door leading into the kitchen. They had found a new path in. She was trapped. But she wasn't trapped alone. She was trapped with him. The stranger had gone limp, collapsing into unconsciousness on the floorboards. His scent filled the small shed, not just blood and winter air, but something wild, electric, like a storm rolling across a deep forest. The scratching at the kitchen door turned frantic. The main pack still raged at the front of the cabin. She had the frostborn outside both entrances, dozens at her front door, God knows how many behind. And in the midst of it all, a dying stranger who smelled like every storm she'd ever feared. Sirai dragged him. It was nearly impossible. He was all muscle dead weight, and she was small moving, only because adrenaline made her limbs obey. She grunted as she pulled him by the shredded sleeves of his jacket, scraping him across the wooden floor away from the kitchen and toward the relative protection of the hearth. The wolves were split, snarling and clawing from both sides. Her cabin, her tiny world, was surrounded. She hauled him onto the worn rug by the fireplace, his head rolling limply. He was burning up steam, lifting from his skin despite the freezing air. When her hand brushed his forehead, it felt like she'd touched a furnace, a raging fever. "Okay," she whispered shakily to herself. "Okay." First the bleeding. She ran to the bathroom, a cramped space with a sink and tub, and snatched her only first aid kit. Eldra's old shears and every clean towel she owned. Returning to him, she knelt, hovering her hands above him. It felt wrong, invasive. But he was dying. She had no choice. She raised the shears and with a trembling breath began cutting away his frozen, blood-soaked layers, his jacket, his underlayers. Fabric fell away, revealing a landscape of carved muscle, old silver scars, and the fresh, brutal wound. Soraya gasped, dropping the shears. It was worse than she expected. 3 deep, savage gashes ripped across his side, messy, jagged, like they'd been carved with crude tools. But it wasn't just the shape that horrified her. The edges of the wound were black, rotting, necrotic shadows creeping outward even as she watched. And the smell. It hit her when she leaned closer, the sharp metallic bite mixed with something bitter, herbal, unnatural. She knew that smell. Eldra had grown that plant in a locked box behind the cabin. Wolf's bane. Eldra had called it monk's hood. She'd warned Sirai never to touch it. It's poison for the sickness of the moon, she'd said. This man wasn't just wounded. He was poisoned. But who would do that? Why? He groaned, twisting on the rug, his eyes blazing. Electric blue snapped open. They weren't glazed with delirium. They were locked sharp, cutting through her. He seized her wrist. His grip was brutal, iron-like. "Who are you?" He rasped, his voice a low thunder in the tiny room. Sirai froze. I'm Sirai. I live here. You're bleeding." His gaze swept the room, taking in the barricaded door, the poker, the low ceiling. Then it returned to her sharp and heavy. He looked at her, not just at her, but through her, as if peeling back every secret she'd ever held. Siray, he repeated. Her name sounded different in his voice, weighty, powerful. Then his eyes dropped to the exposed wound. His expression hardened. The poison. It's spreading too fast. It's Wolf's bane, Siray whispered, barely able to force the words out. His eyes snapped hers, a flash of shock breaking through the agony. You recognize it, he rasped. My grandmother, Eldra. She used to grow it. She told me. Siray faltered, trying to recall the exact warning. She said it stops the change. The man's face twisted violently. His entire body arching off the floor as pain ripped through him. His teeth clenched tight and a low feral growl rumbled from his throat. Siray scrambled backward. It's okay, he forced out, voice ragged and strained. The poison. It's fighting me. But I'm fighting it back. He collapsed again, chest rising in harsh, uneven breaths. They're still out there. It wasn't a question. Yes, Siray answered, her voice trembling. They're at both doors now. It sounds like they're trying to break the whole house apart. He shut his eyes, breathing sharp and uneven. They can smell it, he whispered. The blood. The poison. When he opened his eyes again, they were sharp, calculating despite the torment. They belong to Vorak's hunters. They know the poison is working. He swallowed hard. They're waiting for me to die. Vorak, Siray echoed. My rival, he growled. He ambushed my convoy in the storm. Coward coated his warrior's claws with toxin. His jaw tightened. He thought I'd bleed out in the snow. He didn't expect you. Siray's thoughts spun wildly. A convoy. A rival. Hunters. Who was he? They're not just wolves, are they? She said, the truth forming even as she spoke it. The way you talk about them. The claws. The poison. He studied her in a long, deliberate stare. No, he said, flatly. They're not. They're like you, she whispered, the pieces slipping into place. The impossible strength. The wild scent. The animal sound in his throat. They wish they were like me, he snapped, grimacing as he clutched his poisoned side. They're shifters. Werewolves. Cursed blood, call them whatever you want. Siray should have been terrified. She should have run. But something else settled inside her, a strange, steady calm. Eldra's warning echoed through her head. A poison for the sickness of the moon. My grandmother. Siray murmured, mind racing. She had remedies for toxins. I think I can help you if you'll let me. The man, this wounded werewolf, looked at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Outside, the Frostborn howled in hungry triumph as if sensing their prey was fading. What's your name? Siray demanded, her voice unexpectedly firm. His blue eyes searched hers. He hesitated, then finally said, Kalion. Well, Kalion, Siray said, grabbing the first aid kit with renewed resolve, you're not dying in my cabin. Those things outside can claw all they want, but you are not dying on my hearth rug. For the first time, something flickered across his features, surprise, maybe even amusement. His head dropped back. As you command, Siray. She went to work. She had no antidote, but Eldra had taught her enough. Charcoal to draw out toxins. Yarrow to cleanse. Willow bark to break fever. She crushed the herbs with steadier hands, now her focus sharp. As she leaned over him to clean the wound, something odd happened. Being close to her changed him. His breathing, still heavy, deepened. The frantic shaking in his muscles eased. He turned his head toward her, inhaling slowly. Your scent, he murmured, eyes drifting shut. It's unlike anything. It calms. Siray froze, her hands smeared with blood and herbal paste. She hadn't noticed anything unusual. She only smelled of wood smoke and the forest. It's blocking the pain, he whispered, disbelief thick in his voice. How Siray had no answer. She pressed the poultice to his wound. Kellyan unleashed a roar so thunderous it made the cabin's very bones tremble. Outside, the Frostborn fell into a stunned silence. But only for a breath. That roar, it was a declaration, a challenge, and the pack answered. The front door groaned under the first slam, then buckled again, a living battering ram of snarling beasts crashing against oak. No more scratching. They were coming in. They're breaking through, Suresh cried, stumbling to her feet. Kellyan was already rising on his hands and knees, dragging himself upright. The poultice at his side was turning jet black. The herbs were working slowly, pulling the venom. But it was draining him fast. Sweat beaded and fell from his face, but his gaze was razor-sharp, cold as a frozen lake. The bar, he growled. Will it hold? Not for long. They'll go for the windows next, Survey warned. He staggered, bracing himself against the stone mantel. Then he took the fireplace poker from her hands, weighing it. This is all I've got, he muttered with a dry laugh. It'll have to be enough. He turned to face the door, bleeding, poisoned, exhausted, but he stood tall, a sentinel carved from war. Behind me, Sarai, he commanded. His voice had changed to deeper, heavier, laced with a raw power that vibrated in her chest. She obeyed instinctively. The side window exploded glass, spraying like shards of ice. Wind shrieked inside, tossing snow and the musk of wet fur. A black wolf launched through the shattered frame, all claws and fangs. Kellyan moved like lightning. 2 strides, and the poker slammed deep into its chest. The beast shrieked, its claws shredding the walls before collapsing halfway into the room. But more were coming. The kitchen, Siri cried as the back door splintered and gave way. Stay! Kellyan roared, throwing himself toward the breach. Siri stood frozen, watching the chaos unfold. He was a tempest fist, steel and fury. The poker became an extension of his wrath, his movements brutal yet precise. He fought like something ancient, a force older than the woods outside. But he was just one man, and they were the Frostborn. Another wolf dove through the front window, then another. The cabin was filling with them. Kellyan was slowing the poison, dragging him down, making him sluggish. One lunged for his throat. He caught it mid-air, but its claws carved deep into his arm. With a snarl, he hurled it against the wall. Sirai screamed. She grabbed the heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove, the only other weapon she had. Kellyan. He was surrounded. 4, 5, 6 wolves circling him like vultures. His body was slick with blood, his strength fading. They were both going to die. No, Siri screamed. The word ripped from her lungs, fierce and raw. And something shifted. Her voice didn't just echo, it struck, like a thunderclap. The effect was immediate. Every wolf froze mid-motion. The circle around Kellyan faltered. Ears flattened. One of the larger beasts whimpered, backing into the others. Even Kellyan stilled, his head whipping toward her. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated. The very wind outside faltered the blizzard, stuttering like it too had heard her. All that remained was Suray's own ragged breath. What? Kellyan whispered, staring at her, like she had become something else entirely. Not fear in his gaze, awe. Leave, Siray said, voice shaking, her arm raised toward the wolves. Then came the growl, from the porch. A new presence filled the threshold, towering. Its fur was a storm of ash and shadow, its eyes yellow, glowing intelligent. It stood upright, a half-shifted horror. A hybrid of man and beast, clawed hands, guttural breath, a monster of purpose. It scanned the carnage, the dead wolves, the cowed pack, Kellyan bleeding. And then its eyes landed on Siray. It sniffed. Recognition flickered across its face. The Omega, the creature growled, its voice a rasp of gravel and blood. Vorak was right. A true Omega. A beacon. Its monstrous gaze slid to Kalion, the king, and his fragile little pet. Fate favors us tonight. Kalion stepped in front of Circe's body, shielding hers, poker raised like a knight's last blade. He was barely standing, tremors shaking his limbs, but his posture held nothing but defiance. "Routh!" Kalion hissed, his tone venomous. "Still licking Vorak's boots, I see. And you're still a fool, my king." Routh sneered, fangs flashing. "That poison should have turned your heart cold an hour ago." His eyes flicked toward Circe. "Unless it's her. Her scent, it's muting the venom, keeping you alive." He laughed. Not a real laugh. A bark hollow and cruel. "Vorak will be ecstatic. He sent us to bury a dethroned king. Now we'll bring him not only a king, but a myth. The last true Omega." Circe's grip tightened on Kalion's torn jacket. "What's he talking about? What are you?" she whispered. Kalion didn't look back. His stare was fixed on Routh. "You won't touch her. Won't I?" Routh stepped forward. Behind him, the Frostborn growled, confidence returning, emboldened by their beta. Kalion's voice dropped low and sharp like a blade unsheathing. "You called me king. A dethroned king." Routh scoffed. Kalion drew a ragged breath. Something shifted in him. The pain was still there, but behind his gaze now burned a dangerous golden light. "I am still king." And when he spoke again, there was an echo beneath his words. A strange, ancient vibration, the same one Circe had summoned without knowing. "And you?" His voice surged dark and commanding. "Have forgotten your place." "Kalion." Circe tugged at his arm, breathless. "What does he mean?" "King what king?" Kalion turned toward her. For a heartbeat his eyes softened. They were no longer just icy blue gold, now rimmed, their edges flickering like a storm ready to break. "I'm sorry, Circe," he said quietly. "I never meant to bring this war to your door." He turned back to face Routh. "My name is not just Kalion. I am Kalion Andor Alpha, king of the Northern Conclave, and you are trespassing in my queen's territory." Routh hesitated. The mask of arrogance faltered, and Kalion moved. It wasn't a fight, it was judgment. The second he reclaimed his name, the very air changed. No longer was he a poisoned man clinging to life. He became the storm, the Alpha. There was no roar. He didn't need one. The power that exploded from him was felt. The pressure slammed into the cabin like a shockwave. Circe dropped to one knee, gasping. The Frostborn collapsed, every last one of them. Bellies scraping the floor, tails tucked whimpering beneath his dominance. Their instincts had no choice. The blood in their veins bent to a king. All but one. Routh, loyal beast of Vorak, refused. "If I can't bring back the king," he growled, turning his gaze towards Circe, "then I'll take his mate." Fatal mistake. Kalion moved faster than the wind, no longer wielding a poker. He shifted not into a wolf, but into something more. His muscles expanded his spine. Rippled fingers elongating into blackened claws, teeth stretching into gleaming fangs. His eyes, no longer blue, now pure molten gold, alive with power too old to name. Circe cried out. Kalion caught Routh midair. He didn't block the attack. He met it full force. Their collision shook the earth. The shattered window became a gateway as Kalion slammed Routh through it and into the blizzard. Silence fell. Inside only Circe remained, and 20 trembling wolves paralyzed in submission. She rushed to the window, heart hammering. Outside, snow swallowed the world. But through it she saw them, two beasts, locked in a battle, not of men, but of legends. Routh, in his half-shifted beast form, was vicious, fast, sharp, and burning with blind loyalty. But Kalion was a king. His every strike held purpose. Brutal, precise, deliberate. He took a slash across the chest, deep gushing, but returned it with a blow so fierce it sent Routh stumbling backward. He was still poisoned, still weakened. But there was something ancient, something greater than strength, guiding his fists. Circe stood at the window palm, pressed against the shattered glass. She could feel him, his pain pulsing through her chest, his rage seeping into her bones. He was fighting for her, for this fragile home, for the crown they tried to steal. "He's the king," she whispered the words, surreal on her tongue. The Alpha King. Suddenly, everything aligned, the ambush, the poison, the traitors. Vorak wasn't just a rival. He was a usurper. Inside, the frostborn wolves stared at her, heads low, eyes swirling with confusion. Their beta was challenging an Alpha King, and their instincts didn't know where to turn. "He is your king," Sarai said, her voice trembling yet vibrating with that strange power again, something deep, something true. A whimper rippled through the wolves. One, a younger, scraggly creature with a white patch on its chest, stepped cautiously toward her. It lowered its head and licked its lips in submission. Outside, Kalian was losing ground. Routh, burning with madness, tackled him, both tumbling in the snow in a frenzy of claws and snarls. Kalian fell to his back, Routh's jaws descending for his throat. "Kalian!" Ciri screamed. Kalian caught the jaws inches from his skin. His arms trembled with strain. The poison was draining him fast. "Die King!" Routh gurgled, blood mixing between his teeth. "No!" Sarai bolted. She ran through the cabin, past the wolves frozen in submission. She ripped open a cupboard, grabbed salt, a tin of black pepper, then her grandmother's hidden jar, pure powdered wolf's bane. She sprinted back to the broken window, lungs burning. Outside, Kalian moved. Maybe it was the sound of her voice, desperation woven into command, or maybe instinct heard her heartbeat. He twisted, bucked, and flipped them over. And in that perfect second, Sarai hurled all three powders into Routh's snarling face. The result was immediate. Routh shrieked a guttural, monstrous sound. He clawed at his face in agony, smoke practically rising from his skin. The salt and pepper burned like fire. But the wolf's bane, it was acid to his kind. It seared his eyes, his nose, his tongue. He rolled away from Kalian, screaming and thrashing. Kalian didn't wait. He rose, not as a wounded man, but as a sovereign of wolves. In one swift motion, he seized Routh by the scruff, lifting the massive beast like a rag doll, claws digging deep into flesh. The wind died. The blizzard quieted to a whisper. Snow fell like feathers around them. Kalian stood tall, golden eyes ablaze, chest rising and falling with power, looking down at the trembling, broken beta. And then the Frostborn emerged, all 30, from the cabin, from the woods, forming a silent, reverent circle, watching. "You bitch!" Routh choked, blinded, his hands clawing at the air. Kalian didn't even blink. "She is your queen." His voice thundered like a war drum. "And you will address her as such." He turned his head slightly. His gaze found Ciri still standing in the window, pale and bleeding, her cheeks scratched from flying glass. "Ciri." His voice softened, but still carried like a royal decree. "What is his judgment?" Ciri froze. All eyes were on her wolves, broken beta, and the king himself. She was just a girl from the ridge, an Omega, and now a queen. He tried to kill you," she whispered. "He serves the one who poisoned you, who betrayed you." "Yes," Kalian answered, steady and grave. "Traitor," she said. The word tasted bitter. "My grandmother, Eldra. She said traitors poison the root, and the poisoned root must be cut out." Kalian nodded once. As the queen commands. He placed his clawed hand at the nape of Routh's neck. For your betrayal of the conclave. For your attempt to murder your king. And for your insult to your queen. A pause. The snow fell silently. Long live Vorak. Routh spat defiant to the bitter end. But Kalian's grip only tightened. Judgment was coming. Routh gave one last ragged gurgle, then Kalian snapped his neck. The crack echoed like thunder in the quiet, snow-choked forest. Routh's body slumped into the blood-stained snow. Kalian stood over him, golden eyes blazing as he scanned the pack. None moved. The frostborn wolves simply watched. Steam rose from their snouts as they breathed in sink, silent and still. He was their king, poisoned, bleeding, barely standing. But he'd won. He turned toward the cabin. His form still surged, with remnants of the half-shift claws still extended, fangs gleaming under the moonlight. Smeared in blood, drenched in snow and grime, Kalian looked like a god carved from battle itself. Terrifying. Magnificent. He took a single step toward Sarai, then collapsed. The fire behind his golden stare flickered out. Claws retracted. Fangs dulled. The alpha energy had drained, and all that remained was the poison and exhaustion crashing down like a wave. Kalian's Sarai cried heart-stopping. He hit the snow, face first, just a few feet from her shattered window. She didn't hesitate. She launched herself through the broken frame, slicing her leg open on a jagged edge of glass. She didn't care. She sprinted to him, dropping to her knees. Her hands trembling as she rolled him over. His eyes were closed, his skin like ice, his breaths shallow. "No," she whispered. "No, you don't get to win and die on me." She looked up and saw the pack, the Frostborn. What remained still stood there, still watching. Sarai, the hidden Omega. No one knew found her voice, a voice that didn't shake. "Help me," she commanded. "Get him inside, now." And the wolves obeyed. It was surreal, terrifying. But even with fear in her chest, a strange authority hummed beneath her skin, and the pack felt it. The scrawny one, the white-patched wolf, stepped forward. He whined softly and nudged Kalian's arm. "Don't nudge him, you idiot!" Sarai snapped, her voice breaking. "Help me lift him." Tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing with rage and panic. She looped her arms under Kalian's shoulders. He was a mountain, 250 pounds of solid warrior. Two of the larger wolves joined her. No hesitation now. One got under his legs, the other under his back. Together, with grunts and low growls, they lifted the Alpha King. Sarai led them, staggering through the snow, toward the broken window. But then, the door. One of the wolves, a sleek, black-furred beast, raced around to the front and rammed it open with its head. The barricade cracked. The door swung wide. And so began the strangest rescue mission imaginable. Two wolves, acting as a stretcher, an Omega woman, guiding their fallen monarch. They passed the broken bodies of their own packmates. No one spoke. Their Sarai pointed voice trembling. "My bed." The wolves entered her modest bedroom, barely an alcove, then, with impossible gentleness, laid Kalian on her quilt. He didn't stir. His breath was shallow. The poison was taking over. Sarai flew into motion. She grabbed towels, herbs, the first aid kit. Everything Eldra had ever taught her about healing came rushing back. Water, fire, heat, she muttered. She turned. The wolves were inside. At least 10 had followed. The rest waited on the porch, eyes glowing like lanterns in the dark. The white-patched one stared at her, head cocked. "You," she pointed. "Get wood. Fire." It blinked at her. "Nothing. Useless," she growled, shoving past. She shoved logs into the hearth, hands trembling so violently, she barely struck a match. The cold was crawling into everything. Wind howled through the shattered window. She had to block it. She yanked down her grandmother's quilts, stuffing them into the frame, a poor barrier, but better than nothing. Then she went to Kalian. She cut off what was left of his gear. She cleaned every new wound, the gash on his arm, the claw marks across his chest. She stitched them, clumsy but determined, her fingers slick with blood and frost. But the poison, it was still winning, and time was running out. The real threat wasn't the wounds, it was what coursed beneath them. Black veins spidered out from Kalian's side, his skin cold and clammy like death itself was coiled inside him. "Come on, Kalian," Sire whispered gently, wiping his face with a cool cloth. "Come on, my king. You can't die now. You called me your queen, you don't get to say that, and then leave me behind." She clung to the memory of his words, her scent. It's calming the poison. She didn't understand it. She was just Sire and Omega. But if her presence could help in any way, then she'd stay. She pulled up a chair, sat by the bed, and took his calloused hand into hers. It was so cold. She rubbed it between her palms, desperate to share her warmth, her will, and she talked. She told him stories about Eldra, about the quiet ridge, about the silence and the fear that ruled her life. She told him he was a fool. "You're a king," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. "Kings are supposed to be smart, not walk into traps and get themselves poisoned." From the doorway, a soft whine broke the silence. The white-patched wolf stood there, ears down, watching. He looked so young, barely more than a pup in wolf years. He padded forward and laid his head on the mattress beside Kalian, eyes locked on his fallen alpha. Sire didn't recoil. Surprisingly, there was no fear in her this time. She reached out with her free hand, hesitating only a moment before resting it gently on the wolf's head. His fur was coarse, wild. "We're going to save him," she said softly to the young wolf. "You and me. We have to." The wolf licked her hand. And so the three of them stayed Sire, the unconscious king, and the once enemy wolf, until dawn cracked through the edge of the blizzard. The storm had passed. Outside, the world was wrapped in silence beneath 4 feet of fresh snow. Sire woke with a start, neck aching. She had fallen asleep, sitting up still, clutching Kalian's hand. He was different. The deathly pallor had faded. His skin looked more alive, his breathing deeper, steadier. She touched his forehead, warm. He wasn't out of danger yet, but he was no longer dying. And his hand, it wasn't just resting in hers. He was holding it. Even in sleep, his grip was firm. Movement in the other room pulled her from the moment. She rose, legs stiff, and walked into chaos. The cabin looked like a battlefield, stained with blood, broken wood glass everywhere. And wolves. They hadn't left. Patch was curled up near the hearth, dozing. 3 others kept silent watch near the window, their eyes alert. As soon as she entered, they rose, tails low, uncertain, but wagging. They were waiting. For her. The realization crashed over her like a wave. Kalian had named her queen. She had defended him, commanded them, saved him. In their world, that meant something. She was more than a survivor. She was their alpha's mate. She was their queen. "Okay," she murmured, voice dry. "This is okay." She went to the kitchen. Supplies were running low. They all needed food, her, Kalian, the wolves. She glanced at the cabin, then at the snow outside. The bodies. 2 of the wolves had died inside. Another at the window. They couldn't stay here, not like this. She turned to Patch. "Help me," she said, motioning to the door. The morning blurred into a surreal ritual. She and the wolves dragged the bodies of their fallen outside into the snow. Not in hatred, but in respect. They had followed a false leader, but they had still been warriors. She was finishing when a voice cut through the frozen silence. "Sire." It wasn't just a voice. It was a command, a plea. She dropped the body she was dragging and bolted for the cabin, snow falling from her boots. Kalian was awake, He sat upright in her bed, his bare chest scarred and stitched. He looked worn to the bone, but his eyes were clear, blue again. No more molten gold, but behind them, a gravity, a quiet power. By his bedside sat Patch and two others like sentinels. Kalion's gaze swept over them, then landed on her. You commanded them. Kalion's voice was rough, frayed at the edges. You commanded them. Sirai twisted her fingers together, guilt and fear knotting in her throat. I had to. You were dying. And they were just standing there. They listened to you. He turned his gaze toward Nevo, and the young frostborn wolf lowered his head with a soft whine. There, Kalion, murmured voice weak but edged with pride. My royal guard. What's left of them. The ones Vorak couldn't break or butcher. He poisoned them, too loyalty poison. He meant to chain their minds to Routh. Sirai swallowed hard. But my voice. It did something. It pushed it back. Kalion nodded slowly, eyes dark with something like reverence. Your voice, Sirai. You're a true Omega. A rare one. Your command shatters compulsions. It clears chaos from the mind. It's the only reason I'm still breathing. Your scent kept the poison from finishing me. Your voice freed my warriors. He looked at her, really looked, and Sirai felt heat rise to her face despite the blood and dirt covering her skin. I put herbs on you too, she added weakly, pointing at the dark poultice. Kalion's expression softened, voice thick. Sirai, you saved my life. You saved mine, she whispered back. He shook his head, pain shadowing his features. I brought all of this to your door. I brought him to you. A new sound rolled across the snow, deep, powerful, unmistakably dominant. A howl. Not from the Frostborn. Kalion's entire body stiffened. In an instant he was on his feet. The sheet fell from him. He grabbed his torn pants and yanked them on, jaw set, eyes blazing. Kalion, you can't, you're hurt. That he growled, storming toward the front door as a royal howl. My loyal wolves, the Mooncrest, what remains of them. Sarah and the Frostborn rushed out after him onto the porch. The storm clouds had finally cracked open. Sunlight shimmered across the ice-covered ridge. There, lined along the opposite rise, stood a dozen colossal Mooncrest wolves, their coats gleaming like metal in the morning sun. The largest, a massive silver alpha, raised his head and howled again. Kalion lifted his hands to his mouth and answered not with a howl, but with a king's roar. Raw, thunderous, ancient. The wolves on the ridge fell silent. Kalion's eyes narrowed. A shadow crossed his face. He's here, Sirai whispered. Vorak. His voice was ice. He followed them through the storm. He's here to finish what the poison started. Sirai's pulse hammered. With what army? All we have is these. She gestured to the 20-plus Frostborn wolves emerging from the tree line, silent, lethal, ready. Kalion looked down at her, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. It was the first time she had ever seen him smile. It was breathtaking and terrifying. Vorak thinks I'm dead, Kalion said. He thinks he's here to clean up the scraps. He turned fully toward her. But he's about to discover his hunters found a queen. His hand reached for hers. Even injured, his grip was sure. He lifted her hand to his lips, his gaze locked with hers. They don't have you, Sirai. A man's voice echoed across the hollow, mocking, arrogant, cruel. Kalion Andor, I know you're alive, cousin. Send out the Omega, and I'll make your death quick. A tall figure stepped from the tree line. He was striking, tall, blonde, draped in white furs like some twisted winter prince. Vorak. Behind him came 10 monstrous shapes, elite half-shifted killers. The Vein Shard. Kalion stepped forward, fury simmering in every line of his body. Vorak. You've always been a coward, poisoning from the shadows. Vorak's smug expression cracked. You alive, impossible. The poison. Routh. Routh is dead, Kalion roared, power shaking the snow beneath them. And your grip over my warriors is shattered. Behind him, the frostborn wolves shifted as one, an entire army forming a wall of fur and fangs. Vorak stared. He hesitated. He looked at his 10 vein-shard assassins. Then he laughed. Vorak looked at Kalion's frostborn. He looked at Siray standing beside the Alpha King, and he laughed. Full-blooded cousin. And you think numbers will save you? He lifted one hand. The wind screamed in answer. This blizzard, it was my magic, and it's not finished. The sky clear, only moments before, darkened like ink spilling across the heavens. Wind slammed into them with the strength of a fist. This isn't just a fight for the throne, Kalion Vorak hissed, every word laced with venom. This is a fight for her. And I do not lose. The final battle had begun. Siray gasped as the gale struck them hard enough to stagger her. He's a blood mage, Kalion growled, eyes locked on his cousin. He uses bloodcraft to twist the storm and supercharge his shifters. He created the blizzard to isolate me. Vorak smiled, cold, elegant, cruel. My vein shard are worth 100 of your trembling half-poisoned pack. He flicked his fingers. The 10 half-shifted assassins fanned out, moving with impossible speed. Kill them, Vorak commanded. His voice boomed unnaturally through the storm. Bring me the girl. The vein shard charged. Pack. Kalion roared. For your queen, hold. The two forces collided with an explosion of snarls, snow, and blood. Vorak's elites tore through the frostborn front line. They were too fast, too strong, too fueled by corrupt magic. Siray grabbed Kalion's arm. We have to help them. No, Kalion caught her wrists, holding her back. His face was all strategy, all calculation. It's a feint. He wants to separate us. He wants you alone. As he spoke, Vorak began strolling toward them, the storm parting around him like he commanded the sky itself. See, Siray, Vorak called, voice silky and poisonous. Your king cowers behind you, a king hiding behind an omega. How pathetic. Kalion growled, claws extending, golden light burning in his eyes. Siray grabbed his forearm. Don't you understand? He's trying to pull you away from me. The magic, I can feel it. It's like static. I can break it. Kalion froze, understanding dawning. You're a disruptor, he breathed. A true omega. Your presence, your voice shatters blood magic. His eyes sharpened. I'm the Alpha, the blade. You're the omega, the shield. They had to fight together. Vorak was only 30 yards away now. How touching, he mocked. He raised his hand and a spear of black ice took shape, dripping darkness. Now, Siray, Kalion said, then squeezed her hand and charged straight for Vorak. Siray screamed, not in fear, but in instinct, and the sound that tore from her wasn't human. It was a pure resonant omega command, a wave of force that rocked the valley. The effect was instant. The storm broke. The wind died. The sky split open, sunlight punching through the darkness. Vorak's vein shard, all enhanced by blood magic, stumbled as their unnatural strength collapsed. Their enchantments shattered. The frostborn surged forward, overwhelming them as they faltered. Vorak's face twisted in disbelief. No, no, you cursed Omega, you ruined everything. He threw the ice spear, straight at Siray. Kalion saw it. He was too far away. Siray. But she wasn't alone. Nevo, the young frostborn with the white patch, hurled himself in front of her. The spear pierced his chest. He hit the snow with a sickening thud. He looked up at Siray with soft, loyal eyes and went still. Siray stared at him, something inside her tearing open. "You monster," she whispered. Kalion slammed into Vorak like a train. No magic, no tricks. Alpha against alpha, blood and fury. They tore into each other, two beasts locked in murderous combat. But Kalion was stronger. His rage clean, his purpose burning. He pinned Vorak claws at his cousin's throat. Vorak gagged blood on his lips. "You can't kill me," he rasped. "The Queen Regent, Aravel, my mother, she will never accept her." Kalion drew back, fury blazing. "My mother is dead, Vorak. You killed her." Vorak laughed a wet, broken sound. "Did I?" His smile was sickening. "She's alive, rotting in the dungeons beneath the capital. My leverage." Kalion stood frozen, the fury in his alpha eyes dimming as a flicker of hope cracked through his grief. But Vorak, ever the viper, seized that hesitation. With a flash of silver, he lunged, blade poised for Kalion's heart. He never made it. A fireplace poker hurled with raw, grieving power struck the back of Vorak's neck like a divine strike of vengeance. He froze. Kalion didn't. He ended it. Silence descended. Blood steamed on the snow under a sky finally at peace. Kalion shifted, returning to his human form. His steps were slow, heavy as he walked to Sirei, who stood motionless beside Nevo's fallen body. He protected me," she whispered, tears brimming in her storm-colored eyes. Kalion's voice cracked. "Yes, he did." "And your mother?" "He lied," Kalion said, though doubt laced his words like frost. No. Sirei stepped closer, placing her trembling hand on his chest. "I felt it, Kalion. I could feel the truth in him." Snowflakes clung to her wild hair. "You brought war to my door." He said, guilt heavy in every syllable. She gripped his face, her violet gaze fierce. "No, you brought me to who I was meant to be." Then she turned eyes sweeping across the surviving Frostborn. "They once tried to kill us," she said, voice low and resolute. "Now we rise together for our queen." Kalion looked at her, not as a survivor, but as his equal, his fated mate. Sirei cast one last look at her broken home. "Let's reclaim yours." The storm had passed, leaving a world reborn in blood and silence. The lonely girl from the ridge stood as a queen, now surrounded by the pack that once hunted her. At her side stood a king, not by birthright, but by fire, by loss, by love. The battle at the cabin was over, but the war had just begun. Vorak was gone, but the venom he left behind ran deep. The true Queen Regent Aravel was still locked away in the capital's shadows, and a kingdom blind and bleeding waited for its rightful rulers. Sirei and Kalion had an army. They had power forged in survival. But most of all, they had each other. The Omega's calm and the Alpha's fury finally united, and they were coming for the throne, one traitor at a time.